Picture, if you will, an apple. It's red or green, it's crunchy and juicy. It's a very nice apple. And that apple has a market value. Now, picture a change in the world that results in everyone deciding that apples should be free. In that scenario, what happens to the people who plant and grow and harvest the apples? They still have a product, but they can't get paid in the way they used to. Now, picture that apple is in demand everywhere. Every time you turn on your TV and see a commercial, there's that apple. When you download an app for your phone, there's that apple. In the movies, in video games, in restaurants, there's that apple. In 2015, the music business is kind of like this. Everyone wants to use music because music sets moods. It creates emotions. It makes people want to dance. In other words, it has value. Yet the marketplace says it's free. This is the dilemma that people who make music find themselves in today. It still costs the same to record and press and promote an album, yet we can't sell this product like we used to. So those of us who produce the music, the artists and labels, have to wonder how long we can keep this up. Is there a future in music, or what?
Can I have a taste of your ice cream? Can I lick the crumbs from your table? Can I interfere in your crisis? No, mind your own business. No, mind your own business.
Music scenes have always been ephemeral. In fact, it's probably impossible to know if you're part of a scene until it's over. But music scenes, at least in retrospect, might be defined as places where creativity flourishes amongst like-minded people, or at least people who share certain touchstone bands in common. The indie rock underground scene of the late 80s and early 90s was fairly widespread, encompassing geographically distant bands like Husker Du, the Melvins, and Bitch Magnet. This scene is the focus of the new book, Your Band Sucks, by Jon Fine, guitarist of Bitch Magnet, who we'll talk to today. His book gives a powerful example of how important scenes can be in giving people a sense of belonging, of having a tribe. Marnie Stern, on the other hand, became a musician without the benefit of a scene. In fact, she created her music in solitude in her bedroom, and she talks later on the show about her desire to constantly challenge herself to write music that she truly believes in, rather than settling for less. Our third guest today is Claudia Meza, a self-proclaimed scene destroyer, who also discusses her move away from playing in a band and into sound installation. That's all coming up today on The Future of What? Stay with us.
Got a bucket of bolts and a jar of old pins. Here lie my hopes in a paper bag full of sins. On the street in the May sky.
Jon Fine is the author of Your Band Sucks, and he joins us from New York via Skype. Jon, welcome to The Future of What?
Thank you so much.
As somebody who sort of identifies as someone who gets it from that era, I mean, I used to put Joyless Street on mixtapes in college, so that should tell you where we're at.
Drumming on that song, right?
Pardon me?
The drumming on that song, right?
Oh yeah, right. I mean, Bitch Magnet, that was always my boyfriend when I was a sophomore in college. He named his bunny rabbit Orestes.
Awesome.
So it was, I definitely got where you were coming from. So I really was dying to know, why did you decide to write this book?
Well, here's the thing. The book wasn't even my idea. The way it came about was that I went to an editor at a Viking with an entirely different book idea. I kind of knew this guy, and we went out to lunch, and he asked me what I was up to, and I said, well, funny you mention that. And I kind of did this whole big song and dance, and like, I got this book idea, and da-da-da-da-da, 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 do this whole big thing, and I do this big, wind-up. I'm like, so what do you think? And I'm kind of like panting, and he's like, yeah, or like total, like nothing. Got absolutely nothing back. So I'm like, holy shit, that didn't go well. And then he said, what else are you up to? And, this was the spring of 2011. So I was like, well, I'm doing some writing, and I'm involved with some, digital startups. but it's really weird. I was in this band and in the 80s and 90s, and our records are getting reissued. And we just got asked to reunite for this festival in England, the festival being All Tomorrow's Parties. And as crazy as this sounds, I think we're going to do it. And he said, "Oh, really? Let's talk about that." So he just got fascinated with that. So as the lunch wore on, we just kind of wound our way around the topic, and I was like, blah blah blah, American Indie Underground, blah blah blah, and about halfway through, he's like, "That's the book. You should write that book."
Well, I think that that's a really good point because, as my husband always says, history is written by the people with the most money.
Uh-huh.
And so we have to be really careful when we come from a scene like this where, that we make sure that we get a chance to tell our own stories. If we don't tell our own story, someone else is going to tell it for us, and they're going to tell it wrong.
Exactly, and I think you and I both know how maddening that is. I mean, like we've experienced it, constantly. I mean, like at the time, I think we feel like it was, misrepresented. Like, I mean, going way back, I'm probably older than you, but like, there would be the punk rock episode of Quincy, and it would just be completely preposterous. And
Right.
and like my parents would be kind of getting upset about it.
It's a surprisingly honest account. I mean, I liked that. I appreciated that about the book. That it was-
What? Okay, but I got to ask you why, surprisingly.
Well, I think you're very honest about it. I mean, we had a certain arrogance
Yes.
as young people. I'm 3 years younger than you, so I'm not much younger than you. But I ran with people who literally wouldn't talk to you if you didn't listen to the right bands. I mean, we wouldn't. We just weren't. I mean, we were just jerks. Like, really, when you look back, you're like, wow, I was a complete jerk. There were tons
I was a total jerk. Can I say
Yeah.
asshole? I mean, I was a complete asshole.
I think you can say
I mean,
asshole. Can we
I
say
don't know,
asshole? I don't know.
all right, we just did. No, I mean, I totally own up to that. And look, excuse me. I started a band. And I got kicked out of it because I was such an asshole. I mean, eventually, we kind of hugged it out in our fashion, and and they asked me back in. But I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, like, I was absolutely an asshole. And like, in looking back, there were, there were people that I kind of owe apologies to in some fashion. I definitely apologized to the guys in the band, and there's probably more. But I mean, I can't really defend that, but there was also the incredible frustration that I'm sure you experienced too, when like there's this thing that was incredibly meaningful to you, and the rest of the world like didn't understand its importance to you, or just its importance in general, and it was just like sort of dismissed. And by the way, like try being in a band called Bitch Magnet. I mean, that's not really the ticket to being like taken seriously. I've been meaning to. I've been meaning to reach out to Larry Crane because I remember reading like some post Vomit launch, like after Vomit launch broke up, and they kind of did like some, to call it an oral history would be too highfalutin, but I mean there was something in a fanzine, and at the end of it he was saying like and they all agree it was like a great experience, but at the end he's like, God, like I spent 6 years or 8 years in a band called Vomit Launch. Like, can you like imagine explaining that to your family? Like,
Right.
and
But I thought what was really great about your book was you took a while to get to the point, but in the very last chapter you really brought it home, because really the essence of what we experienced was we were in a scene, and that scene created belonging for us.
yeah.
And I thought
Yeah.
that's a super powerful message, because I feel like today in the age of the internet, I'm not really sure what has happened to scenes. I don't know if people really have scenes. Maybe they have scenes in their hometowns still, but I feel like the internet has diffused it all so much. You can go on the internet and be in a chat room, and that can be your scene. But
Sure.
it's like, are those people that you see face to face? I don't know.
Well, I can't speak to what's going on right now, but like my gut feeling is that there's still venues, there's still a circuit, there are still bands. I mean, like I don't know who they are, but I know they're out there, and so there has to be some of this. And the internet is it's a complicating thing. I mean, I spent years in my real life job like writing about media, so all of that was about the internet is doing this thing to this thing, and there was the digitization of many aspects of the American economy, the world economy, hell, many aspects of being a human being. There's a lot of collateral damage. there are fewer bookstores, there are fewer record stores. Uh, there's a very interesting conversation to be had over the net gain or net loss of a digitized music world for a musician on the level of the bands we're talking about. But I mean, I have no question, there's no question that it got a lot harder for a lot of independent labels. I mean, forget the major labels. We're not even talking about them right now. And I think, but at the same time, I do think of, some lonely kid in like the middle of Nebraska who very early on can get a sense that there are other people like him or her out in the world, and that's like so powerful.
But I really also thought that it was great that you made the point that, it's like we were weirdos and freaks. We found the other weirdos and freaks who fit in our little puzzle piece, and we had these fabulous, playing in bands, touring, making records, sleeping on really disgusting floors for years, experiences. And now we've arrived in our 40s, and you very commonly can meet somebody at a party or at a work function, and they just have no concept. They are they just look at you like, what?
Exactly.
It's crazy.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've gotten a little better at explaining this, but I don't know, maybe not. The people that I work with now are kind of the coolest about this, but it's sort of been part of the package because when I started my job, everyone was aware of the fact that I was like, this book was coming out, and so I don't know, maybe I just lucked out.
But it kind of plays into this whole idea that I'm talking about with belonging and with finding your scene and finding your tribe, because I feel like ultimately now what is really clear to me is it doesn't matter that these people don't understand, that 90% of the people that I meet don't understand what I do, because those 10% who do, that's really what matters.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like, we were never doing this to, and this is actually the other thing that, as you know, is really hard to explain. Like, I did an interview with a radio station in upstate New York, and like the guy was like, "At any point, did you think you were going to make it?" And I said, "Well, that really wasn't what this was about. I mean, like, as long as we could, like, make another record and do another tour, that was it. I mean, like, the idea that someone from the scene was going to be a thing was just absolutely inconceivable. Like, I mean, all of, like, I had an entire arc of a band, like formation, flourishing, breaking up, like before Nirvana was anything. So, I mean, like, that wasn't even on the fucking table, So it still is weird because I don't know, like there is always that conversation, in one form or another. But as you say, there are people who get it. I guess those are our people. I mean, and those are the ones who, as you say, kind of matter in terms of this conversation.
We did a live show yesterday, and I had Tucker Martine in the studio, the producer.
Uh-huh.
And we were talking about basically how different scenes in different cities have a different vibe. And we were talking about the Portland scene.
Uh-huh.
And, people in Portland are super duper friendly. Like there's like a big metal scene, there's a big Americana scene, there's like all these in between. And a lot of the same people play in the same bands. Like they just cross over and you'll see your friend so-and-so in, 6 different bands. And it's just very supportive. And it suddenly dawned on me, I was like, is it because nobody has any hopes of anything bigger that they're able to be sort of supportive and loving? Because I don't know about you, but I find like the LA scene where everybody thinks they're one step away from being the next big thing is super closed, and people are kind of cold, and or even in Brooklyn when I was playing in bands in Brooklyn, I mean, it was like, I remember that band Morningwood. They were like convinced that they were about to be, number one on the pop charts. You couldn't get those guys to talk to you.
I don't remember. I don't remember them or what happened to them, but
well, see, and I rest my case.
I don't know. I mean, the thing with New York was that it was always really big in the sense that there was always so much going on that like you could find, the people that weren't going to be dicks, and like. It also, I mean, maybe it was just the luck of the draw in terms of, where I was and who I know, but it was like really open. Like I would spend, weekend nights drinking with, in the same room. I mean, like my drinking crew is like some guy in some crazy noise band that no one was ever going to like, and, 1 or 2 of the guys in Helmet. And they were totally, they were totally awesome. I mean, like they were real serious music heads. It was the rhythm section, real serious music heads. Like we'd plenty to talk about. And like, oh, by the way, every now and again they just disappear and go on the road for 6 months. So I mean, I never really felt it like that. And usually the people that I did get it from, like they were easy enough to ignore, and there were so many of us that it didn't really matter. Things did get weird in terms of like, commerce coming in and major labels coming in. And like that happened a couple of times, in my time in New York. But I don't know. I mean, I didn't feel it affecting the interpersonal level. We could argue about whether or not it affected some like aesthetic decisions certain bands made. But chances are the bands that made those aesthetic decisions weren't going to be our favorite bands anyway.
Right.
So there's that.
My favorite story that Slim tells about the pre-Nirvana days in Olympia, Washington, was that he and Kurt were living in the Martin Apartments, which is this really small apartment building in downtown Olympia, right before Kurt went on tour for Nevermind, and he never came back. And they just threw all of his belongings out in the street eventually. Because he just never came back. And it was like he literally, like, that's how unprepared they were for what happened with that record. So let me ask you one question, because you say this in your book. You say maybe rock doesn't matter anymore. Do you really think that, or were you just being kind of curmudgeonly at that moment?
Well, I was being curmudgeonly, as I am a lot in the book. But seriously, I don't think there's any real question that hip hop has taken the place in culture that rock and roll had on a fill in the blank 25 years ago. It feels to me that there's no question that, hip hop is the dominant, strain of pop music by a lot. Does that matter in terms of the stuff we're talking about? I don't think so. But I also think that, maybe it's just me, but like I think that if you're there's many more paths. When we were coming up, like, you were going to start a band. Now you could be a DJ. Now you could get into dance music. I mean, like, I feel that, there's a lot more subcultures available to you. So there's like less primacy of this thing, like people can have, I'm friends with a lot of musicians here who are doing cool stuff that like didn't ever really have anything to do with punk rock. And I'm not saying that like everybody has to love Black Flag as much as me to be cool, but I mean, I would feel that like everyone had to come like in the era that you and I are talking about, or the era in the book, like the era in the book, the 80s and 90s, like you had to in some way come through punk rock. Like maybe it was Minor Threat, maybe it was the Sex Pistols, maybe it was, I don't know, fill in the blank, maybe you were an idiot and it was the Dead Milkmen, I don't know, but like there was some of that. And now like, you can be, that thing is less central. So I guess all of those things is kind of what I was getting at. And by the way, like no real value judgment, I mean, on any of it being a good or bad thing, but I mean, it's just different now.
No, I'm fascinated by that whole question because, when we were coming up in the 80s, there had only been rock music for 30 years.
Right.
And now there's been rock music for, what is
60 years.
60, wah, wah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it changes everything. It makes it really different because it's not what it once was.
Yeah, and as like in 2000, if I'm getting my math right, in 2000, which by the way is 15 years ago, like 2000 is as far from the first Sex Pistols record as the Sex Pistols record was from Elvis Presley. Right. Which is mind blowing to me because to me like there's a huge. I mean, I got really into a lot of like 70s music, 70s funk, krautrock, psych, and like weird hard rock, big obsession of mine. But to me, there's still like this enormous before and after. And like whether you draw the line at Stooges or the Ramones or the Sex Pistols, like there was a huge before and after. And like I just feel that like that's like it's all just rock and roll now, for good or ill. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, I don't know.
Well, Jon Fine is the author of Your Band Sucks, which is available now. Jon, thank you so much for coming on The Future of What.
Thank you so much. Can I be annoying and plug the book reading I'm doing?
Absolutely.
So on Sunday, June 7th, I will be in conversation with the illustrious music writer Douglas Wolk at Powell's in beautiful downtown Portland. And I am so incredibly stoked to be doing this there. And I hope to see you all there.
In a moment, we're going to talk to the guitarist and singer Marnie Stern, who has put out all 4 of her records on Kill Rock Stars. Her experience is unique because, unlike Jon Fine, she didn't come out of a certain scene. Instead, she made music in a vacuum by herself, the anti-scene experience. Let's take a listen to her song, Year of the Glad. Welcome back to The Future of What? I'm Portia Sabin, and right now we're talking to the fabulous Marnie Stern.
Hello.
Yay! I'm so glad to have you in the studio.
I'm glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about, first of all, you might want to tell people how you started.
I started for a long time, I think, before I was with you, probably 10 years of working on songs on my own at home and playing shows out. And this was right at the tail end of when bands mostly got signed from being seen at shows.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know any bands who got signed from anything online. I had sent my demo in, and that was like a strange thing.
Yes, and Marnie is one of 4 artists who's been signed to Kill Rock Stars in 24 years off of a demo tape.
Yes.
So
that was great because I was playing at places where I'd be in the lounge somewhere, where no one would really be able to see or understand what I was doing. But I was working on songs all the time, constantly, and really listening to lots of strange music and really trying to figure out and find my own voice. And
yes. And so something about you that people might not know, you're from New York City.
That's
you're from
right.
the Upper East Side. You
That's
were born
right.
and raised here,
Right.
like me.
Right.
And you, at the time that you were teaching yourself to play guitar,
Yeah.
you were otherwise leading a pretty straight, normal life, right?
Yes. It's so funny, too, because you grew up similar to me, and you're not like most people there either.
New York is an interesting place.
Yes. But yeah, I was working a 9-to-5 job at an advertising agency for 7 years, working as an assistant to a creative director. And it was literally 9 to 5. And at 5 on the dot, I would leave, get a fountain soda and a piece of pizza, and then work on music until 2 in the morning and get up and do it all over again every day. And I was playing in bands here and there, but really I was working on my own stuff. I started on 4-track, then, I didn't get my own computer in my home until 2003 maybe, and that's when I got Pro Tools, and that's when I started recording, and then the sounds changed, and then I was doing more layering, and probably just being by myself forced me to try different things.
And it's just so interesting. From a cultural standpoint, it has always fascinated me, your journey, because I feel like in our culture, it's way more common for boys to sort of seclude themselves, especially in that all-important 12 to 14 range.
Yes.
Where they just shut themselves in their bedrooms and they teach themselves to play guitar.
Yes.
And then by the time they get to high school, they already know how to play. And that's what happened to me. I wanted to be in a band when I was 14.
Right.
But by the time I picked up the bass guitar and went to school with it, all the guys had been playing them by themselves
Yes.
for so long.
Yes.
They were so much better than me that I was like, forget it.
Yes, yes.
I just gave up.
Yeah, that's true, though, and that's very interesting. But then a lot of people learned to play, but just kind of didn't have much creativity to what they were doing. Just, would lock themselves in their rooms and learn this record, that record, this record, and then that was it. And
Right.
And then just want to be on a stage.
Right, exactly. So creativity is actually an entirely different thing than just technical proficiency.
Yeah, and feeling like there's something you want to express, but not really knowing how. And that was, for many years, the most frustrating part of not knowing how to take an instrument and put myself into it.
Right.
Right.
And I know I did not sign you. My husband, Slim Moon, signed you to Kill Rock Stars, but I know because he brought home the demo tape and we listened to it over and over. And one of the things that we loved about your music that's still true is that you play what would be considered very technical, very muscular and masculine music,
Yes.
but with a completely Marnie
Yes.
thing, like just a feminine, like you're a girl. Like no one would listen to you and be confused.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I kind of knew that going into it, but I'm sort of torn with like an angel on one side that wants proficiency, that I like the technical aspect of things. I think it's amazing to watch someone's fingers going crazy. But I also think there's something slightly tacky to that. And so I was constantly pulling myself back and forth. And that's, I guess, where my songs came from.
Right. So you still feel driven to write songs though, right?
Oh, of course, yes. To my detriment, it's where I derive a lot of my identity from. And, at this point, I want to feel like I don't need to do that. And I don't need to, but it sure does help feel good when I produce something. I mean, it's like anything. You feel good about yourself when you create something that you like.
Right.
On the flip side, 99% of the time, I'm creating things that I don't like, and then I'm very hard on myself.
And I think that's what everybody understands as just how artists live their lives.
Yeah.
You have something inside of you, you want to get it out, and you want to get it out properly.
Yes.
In a way that you like, and you're annoyed at yourself when it doesn't work out.
Are people hard on themselves? I mean, I don't know, because I don't know, and I can't go into anyone's brain for the process, but I feel like a lot of people, or I would imagine a lot of people, get to a point. I always wanted to get to a point where no matter what I did, I'd finally think, this is pretty good, no matter what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't, it still
Doesn't feel that way to you.
Like,
Yeah.
this is terrible. And then, wow, this is really good. I don't.
There's no middle ground. That's fine, though. I mean, I feel like that's just your process. There's plenty of people. I would rather have someone do that than someone produce something that's mediocre and be like, it's good enough.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
fine.
You're right.
And I think, I listen to music sometimes and I'm like, ooh,
Everywhere.
they settled, man.
It's everywhere.
They settled
Yeah.
for that little song there.
Well, also, that's all I really seem to hear everywhere else all the time. Like,
Right. Yeah.
where do teens still have angst? I'm
Right.
sure they
Don't
do.
you think they do? I think they must.
So why doesn't it come out in their music?
Exactly. Where's the anger? Where's the
Well,
frustration?
I think it's uncool right now for kids to be, quote, emotional at all.
Oh, interesting.
I think they think that's lame and overreaction to anything, or there's something about it I know that is offensive, which is so bizarre.
Right? So bizarre.
Because doesn't that mean that they're going to bottle everything up and then just at some point explode?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you'd think. But when? I'm like, when does that happen? When you're...
Maybe it doesn't. Maybe
Maybe it
evolution
doesn't.
is happening and that won't be the way. Maybe there won't be. I mean...
Or everyone's just passively going to go along until climate change crushes us. I mean, that's
No,
what
maybe.
I think.
Maybe.
It's just really scary because, I mean, we were younger in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
And there was, I mean, look at our label, look at Kill Rock Stars.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know.
Bratmobile, Bikini Kill, Unwound, Nirvana.
Which is becoming retro, like
Right,
people
cool
are
retro.
cool retro, but
Yeah.
without the
emotion.
emotion.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, this sounds like, but it's just
Exactly.
a shell of it.
Yeah.
And that, I think, I was even listening to something the other day. Someone said, oh, check out some band. And I was listening and I was like, yeah. This reminds me of like the New York scene in even later, it was like 1995. But it was just as though you took that time without the whole feeling of it. And I guess the retroness of it is the cool part.
Right. Just how it sounds
Yeah.
and how it looks.
But also, what's even more ridiculous about that is no one has to dig really hard anymore to find anything. So before, when you would pick up something, you would have to search for records like to find good saturated coverage of what a sound was happening.
Right.
And then you were like cool because it was hard to find, and then you were one of the only people who knew about it.
Right.
Now there's access to all of it all the time. So what? Yeah, you went on the internet, took 2 seconds, found these bands, mimicked them.
Right. when it comes out of context like that, I wonder too, because I feel like it's the same way with films and TV. You know, people can watch anything they want, and so they don't necessarily have any historical perspective on it at all.
Right.
You know, it's like we don't understand what the history of the time that this was made in, like what was it speaking to?
Right.
And
Right.
now we have it's just like, oh look, here's a cool artifact.
Right.
It's weird. It's like we live in this incredible consumer culture to the point where
Yeah.
everything is just a commodity and it has nothing. It's divorced from history
Yes.
or reality,
Yes.
which is just super weird.
You know, like there was that trend for a little bit of, I mean, I'm guilty of it too, just very like upbeat woo-woos in songs, like a lot of joy and happiness. But I think it's like the game telephone, just people do it and then different people do it and then different people do it. And it just gets so worn down that they're not really happy or trying to express any part of the original idea of whoever was doing it.
Right.
But there's the song and that's the trend.
Right. Now tell us about when you wrote your first album, you've been reading a ton of philosophy.
Ton of philosophy,
Yeah.
tons of art history books, which I got to say, I'm so divorced from all of that stuff now. I look at it and like some of the books I was reading, and I think, Jesus, you know, a lot of concentration was happening. But yeah, as I said before, I was really trying to I was frustrated with the instrument of the guitar, of making a song. I listened to all this music and could kind of mimic what they were doing, but didn't really want to be doing that and didn't know how to put myself into it. And so when I was reading all of these different things, it was all about individuality and becoming, you know, the best a lot of things that would sound like self-help things, but that you really need when you're, well, I guess you'd always really need it, but I really needed it at that point in my life to try and step out of the box, you know, especially because I was around Brooklyn in that blow-up scene of early 2000s where it was, I mean, I guess there are still a lot of bands in Brooklyn everywhere.
It was different though. I felt like it was different.
Yeah. And so I just was doing really strange things, like writing myself letters of encouragement, receiving them, opening them up in the mail.
Wow.
Feeling really touched by them.
Oh my
read
God.
them because it was a real loner period in my life. You know, I had a close friend, but I didn't see anyone. I would go for, you know, the whole weekend. Of course, I wouldn't see anyone. And then after the first record came out, and then I had a, you know, music career and was touring all the time, I became more and more isolated and would go 2 months at a time without seeing anyone, without dressing. I was on a schedule, the opposite schedule, where I'd wake up at midnight, be up till 8 in the morning, drink a beer, be up till 2, then go to bed, wake up at
Wow.
midnight for a long time.
Oh
And
my God. Yeah.
oh, yeah. And that wasn't to like further an artistic side. I just was so gung-ho. I was so in it, was so convicted, and I was just doing it nonstop. Like I was reading about sleep patterns, and because I was doing music like 3 hours, then a break, then 3 hours, then a break, I kind of got it in my mind that I could just rotate around the clock and sleep a few hours in between.
Wow.
But no socializing. I mean,
Right. Wow. That's amazing.
kind of.
I mean, crazy.
Yeah,
On
crazy,
some level.
crazy.
Definitely. But, you know, also interesting.
Yeah.
And to know, I mean, I think the other thing about being a musician, being in the music business like I am, and I think everyone that we work with,
Yeah.
like we're music crazy people. Like we love
yeah.
music, and we've had that experience of music feeling like a song saved your life.
Yes, of course.
And so to have gone through that, it's like you realize the true potential and the power of music. And that's why I've been so interested lately in this sort of lack of like, where's the fire?
Well,
Where's
my frustration right
passion?
now comes with, for a long time, I was angry and frustrated. And those are like emotions on my part with the way things were going with popular music, with blandness, with put some effort into it, no personality. But the thing that worries me now is that I'm starting to not care. Like I'm so
right.
sick of hearing it, seeing it, that I just almost want to shut it all out. And
Right.
that's not good because
Right.
I don't know why, but I just know that that's not good. Like I
Yeah.
am so tired of being on tour and seeing 3 crappy bands who have never even worked together to try and come up with anything. It's just band after band after band. I mean, it's just a really strange time right now. And I guess you just ride it out and keep going. There has to be a point where that protest, angsty something rises to the surface, because that's the nature of things. You can't have the way the internet is, the way everyone just looking down all the time. I mean, walking down the street, I do it, but it is, I know this is just an obvious thing, but if you walk down the street of Manhattan, I'm in the elevator 3 times a day with someone who doesn't get off because they're looking at their phone when the thing opens.
Right.
It's like everyone's just stuck in this.
This weird sort of checked out.
Yeah. So why would the music be any different that they're making?
Right. No, I think you're right to say that a change is coming, because I'm starting to feel like we've got to be on the cusp of something pretty serious, because it just feels so stuck.
Yeah.
And it feels so empty. Just to have fun songs be the only thing that we've got going on in a culture is kind of scary.
But that's what I mean by, when I say uncool, it's unfashionable to be too emotive. It's
Right. That's totally true. And I think when you look at the Riot Girl movement and like Olympia in DC in the early 90s, it became fashionable to give a crap.
Yes, exactly.
To like actually have an emotion and to think things and to do stuff. And I think that was true. I mean, think about like X-Ray Specs with polystyrene. I mean, that the whole punk movement of the 70s was because people were like, no, I want to express myself even if I don't know how to play an instrument. I'm just going to jump on the stage and do it. And I feel like we're really, really due for that.
But if the person jumps on the stage right now, then somebody films it and then it goes up onto the internet on their Facebook, and then people make fun of them for first of all, there's no room for like a movement to cultivate, like a bunch of people getting together. And it used to be there'd be some club and 5 bands would just play there regularly every weekend, and people who came to the thing would say, oh, these bands play here all the time, and they're kind of like, oh, they all get to know each other, and then they do bands together.
Right.
But now, the first night, it would be videoed on the internet. Oh, they were doing something kind of cool. Then someone over here hears it. And in a way, what's frustrating is you would have thought that would be great if that could happen. Then that person would hear that, make something amazing, and then you'd have, the idea of the internet was so great for a long time, like this connected world.
Right.
But oddly, it's making everyone lazier.
Right. So it's dissolving scenes rather than helping scenes form.
I think
That's interesting. I think the issue is exactly what you keep getting at with this whole idea of, do you have anything to say?
Right.
Like, do people have anything to say, A, and B, do they feel comfortable saying it? Maybe that's the problem.
Right.
Is like, can they actually say what they think, or are they just so terrified that everyone will come down on them?
The way teens get beat up by their friends on Facebook and stuff with comments, they say those are way meaner than anyone would ever say to you in school.
Right, because you can do it anonymously. Yeah, that's terrible.
Yes, and with music, because any type of creative endeavor, you're so sensitive to what people would say. So yeah, I think it's probably difficult. But if I needed, the other main point that I wanted to make is that I needed all of those years being stuck in my bedroom to find my sound. I needed time there were times where I had different record CDs that I would make every 2 years thinking, no, these are good. And I thank God every day that it didn't happen until when it happened, because I wasn't ready. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's a big thing.
We've been talking to Marnie Stern. Marnie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
On The Future of What? Claudia Meza is a sound artist and former guitarist of multiple bands, including Explode into Colors. Claudia, welcome to The Future of What?
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So I'm having you here today. We're talking about scenes, and you have been in a couple of scenes in your life, actually several. You grew up in LA, and so you were in the LA scene, the LA sort of noise rock scene, and then you moved to Olympia, and you were in that scene. And then now you live in Portland, and so you're part of this music scene. And would you like to tell us anything about music scenes in general, those 3 scenes you've been in?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I don't know, you don't really know you're in a scene or that something's a scene until it's like dead and gone. And you're like, oh, yeah, that was cool. We had a good time then, remember? And now things suck. And I feel like myself, I feel like I'm usually the harbinger of like death for a scene. Like,
You show up and it's just
yeah,
over.
I'm just like, hey guys, ready to party? And they're like, oh, okay, everyone's gonna go move to New York now. Cool, let's see you later.
Is that why you moved up to Olympia from LA?
Well, I moved to Olympia from LA. I was like 18 because I was going to college, and my friends had just started this club called The Smell, and they were a little bit older than me. And the only people and it was like this huge warehouse. This is at the time, like early aughts. It was a huge warehouse, and there'd usually be like 5 people who would come. So that was my scene in LA. Like I don't know, like I would say it's more of a collection of friends,
Right.
that were hanging out at one point, but it was not like a bustling scene. Like the biggest star that would come and play would be like Nels Cline, who I adore, but that was a big deal. Like Nels Cline's hanging out with us,
Right.
And then I left.
And then the smell
And then
exploded.
and then it's like, no H, Miku Miku. And I was like, really? I was so bored for so long.
Dang it.
Yeah, I was like, and I had moved to Olympia in this like really great time when there was this rock opera called The Transfused, and everyone was really excited, and like Lady Fest just happened, and like all this cool stuff, and I was like, wow, that's great. And like I swear to God, 6 months later, it was just like everyone moved. I was like, oh, cool.
Here I am.
Yeah, and then I graduated from Evergreen, thank God. And then I moved to Portland, and that's the thing about Portland is that I had no expectations. And again, since I was like, scene, like what is that? I didn't know that I was part of a scene until again it went away. And I was so lucky that I got to play like places like Deca Manor. Like when I came to Portland, I knew about it because I would play shows in bands I had been in Olympia, and it was mainly house shows, and that was what I found so attractive about the Portland music scene is that you could play, and it was just teenagers. Like at the time, I was in my mid-20s or so, but like they were just these babies that had houses, and they would just like treat you like royalty. Like they're just so excited that you were there, and it's not like you were in a band that anyone knew of. They were just excited because you were playing music, And I like found that so charming about Portland. It was actually less jaded than Olympia, and Olympia is a smaller town.
Wow.
And I found that just so like refreshing, So when I moved down here, I mean, I just like really just played. I played shows like every week, just in somebody's house, and I remember the first time I played Holocene, like I was just like, what? Weird. This is so
It's
odd.
a stage.
Yeah,
I
like
don't
what's
understand.
happening? It's like clothes that are too starchy. You're just like, oh, I don't know. And then yeah, like 3 or 4 years later, all the house shows went away, and then I was like, oh yeah, I was part of a scene.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, I did it again. I just like
killed the scene.
killed the scene.
Claudia Meza, scene killer. That's why we're talking to you today. Because we're warning the country about you. If you see this woman, run. Your scene is over.
Oh, that's so funny.
Where are you going next to kill her?
I've heard Brooklyn's a really cool spot.
Oh my God, hilarious.
I've been wanting to move back to LA, but they're like, no, you're cool.
Yeah, stay right
you can
there.
Stay there.
You stay there. Oh my gosh. But in all seriousness, you have been in many bands that I have been a huge fan of. And you have been kind of your niche has been a little bit maybe what people would call noise rock to some extent. Although
I can see that.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe experimental rock, something to that effect.
I would have to agree.
Yeah. And you're a really fantastic guitar player, which I'm just going to
thank
say
you.
so that everybody knows that who's listening.
That's sweet.
But as someone who's been in multiple bands, you've never been in that one band where it was like we're going to be in this band for 15 years and we're,
Right.
going to the next level and we're doing all this crazy stuff. Do you feel like that just hasn't happened yet? Like you haven't found that perfect band? Or do you feel like playing music for you is more about just expressing yourself and whatever situation you're in is good for doing that?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. One being because it's one that I'm constantly trying to answer for myself. I think when I was like a lot younger, like 16, 17, all I wanted was to be in like, like my version of like the Beatles. Like it's a love story. Like you're just like, they just found each other and then they just wrote all these cool songs and everyone has an opinion and like it's so cool. And then you read like the, biographies of the Beatles and you're like, oh man, that was just whoa.
They didn't get along at all.
Nobody. Like same thing with the Rolling Stones, or like you're like they all have separate buses, Like
well, it's like look at Zayn Malik leaving One Direction. I'm like, that's probably the first guy who's ever actually been like, guess what? I hate you guys. I'm out.
Yeah.
As opposed to everybody else who's like, I will suffer in silence for the millions.
I know. I think he left just because he's too handsome.
Oh, you like that one? You think that one's cute?
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh my God, I think the Harry Styles one is so cute. I can't believe it.
Well, you know what?
He looks like a girl. I love boys
He
who
looks
look like
your
girls.
son. That's
He
why.
does. He totally does. You got me. That's why I like him.
It's so true. They have the same haircut. It's like a junior.
So funny.
Yeah.
Aw, so cute.
Anyhow, wait, I'm like now lost in like.
Oh, I was asking you about, are you just not in that band?
Well, I think what happened for me anyhow is that after slaying all these scenes, like I got like a little. No, but in truth, like I got a little. I felt a little bored of playing the same kind of shows, doing certain things that I felt like I wasn't growing as like a musician, and so I wanted to try something different. And it wasn't ever like that perfectly worded out. I was struggling through trying to figure out why I wasn't enjoying myself. Like my last band that I think people heard about or cared about, as much as I did, was Explode Into Colors. And after playing with that, with, those, really talented ladies and not feeling any enjoyment from it, and I just had to like hold back and be like, what's wrong with me, And there was a lot of, as dynamics, that made certain things harder to move on or succeed in a certain industry. But it was also me, like I didn't want to work on it, and that's a big deal. Like that's a decision. And after that, I just started doing like sound installations. I started working more with PICA, the Portland Institute of Contemporary Art, and doing things that were a little more esoteric and not like song structured or whatever. But it really did like help like develop and satisfy something that I knew I wasn't really getting from being in a band. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because I've been in bands since I was like since I've been 15, I've been in bands.
Yeah.
Been in bands that nobody's cared about since I was 15. That's just
That's like the true life of a musician.
Yeah, I just want my wiki to say that. Like if I ever have a Wikipedia, they're just like Claudia Meza's been in bands since she was 15. That's nobody cares about.
Why do we do this? Like, are we just doing it? Do we do it for ourselves? And is the art that we're getting out there making us happy enough to keep going on that path? So it's really interesting that you were kind of like, maybe the band structure is not what I need right now. Maybe I need something else.
Exactly. And that's what I've been trying to kind of figure out. Because what I did right after Explode Into Colors ended, I started a new band with a good friend of mine, and I realized that I could just write songs all day. I could just write songs, but doesn't mean that they're anything I wanted to communicate or didn't have that urgency, because I feel like that's music I connect to, is there's an urgency. It's not just like, what a cool produced song, which you can listen to the radio and be like, well, that's a cool song, random ass manufactured pop star. But like the thing that makes you really excited about music, it's the art of it. It's the communication from another artist to you. And I felt like at that point I had nothing to say. Mm. And I was like in a band that I could write pop songs, or I could do this, or I could try it, a hat, on and just be like, this is what I am now or whatever. But it just wasn't at all. It didn't feel genuine, and I knew it. It was, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. This is a cool project for me to like kind of figure out what I want to do next. But it's not something that maybe I should like be investing as much time, because being in a band and being a working musician is hard work. Like it's
really hard
I
work.
feel like people. I think I feel stupid saying that out loud, but I feel like people just need to hear it like over and over again.
Yeah, no, they do.
Like, they just need to hear it. Like it's really hard work, and especially now when just the way people are getting paid and the industry's changing, especially young musicians, and they're trying to figure out how to make money and all that. Like it's even more interesting, like how much harder it's become. But it's also kind of exciting. But I find like looking at really. Yeah, I find like staring off cliffs exciting, and I'm sure most people would be terrified.
So tell us about some of your sound installations. Like, what kinds of themes are you exploring with this stuff?
I do a lot of stuff with field recordings, and creating like new instruments or more interactive. It's almost like my way of interacting with an audience that I'm used to doing while I'm on stage, but this way it lives in a room. People can go in and then kind of create their own narrative of what they're experiencing, and I find that really exciting. And also, I mean, I've always been obsessed with John Cage, and so that to me, I think if people follow any of my sound art, they'll just be like, I know someone who likes John Cage. Just as much as if someone listens to my music, they're like, somebody likes the slits, It's like, yeah, it's true. But yeah, so what I did, like this last thing I did with Pico is they found me 32 or 33 of these Caliphone tape players. Caliphone tape players, they're like the kind, if you're like old enough, there was at one point a language arts room, or like if you were in ESL, you would sit down with these tapes and like learn how to say words correctly, or like not have a lisp or whatever. And I was always in one of those classes because I used to talk really funny when I was a kid, I guess, and I also didn't know English, so so I like hung out with these tape players all the time, and they would make they're like, you can go home with them and practice. And I found out you could like record over the tapes if you put like a piece of like clear tape on a tab, and then I just started using it to record my everyday sounds. Like I was like, oh, this is cool, and I would like I would tell it stories. It just became this thing that I like really loved, and that I would, without knowing, I was making like little mixtapes, of just like I would sing into it. I would just record my mom washing dishes because I thought it sounded cool. It sounds really precocious, but I was just not doing my homework is what I was, doing.
Right.
And so when I got older, I used to have these images of like all these tape. I actually just had a dream of me going into a room and all those tape players, I'm sure it was just my brain working stuff out, were hanging from the ceiling, the exact same Caliphone tape player. And every time I would hit play, I was trying to remember something. I can't explain it. It was just like this weird dream where I was like, I wanted something, and those tape players were, and I couldn't remember, I couldn't hear it, and like, and then I woke up and I was like, what a cool dream, frustrating, but what a cool dream. And then I was like, I wonder what the tape players were playing, and then that's how I kind of came to that sound installation, and I decided that they were playing pitched water sounds, so then you could create like these chords or these like rhythms with just water. But most people who go in, like you wouldn't know if it was water because I manipulated it, to a point where it sounded, sometimes people thought it was like crazy, Tibetan bowls.
Oh yeah.
Because I would just get the like last bit of a resonance from and then, echo it out. So yeah, it was fun. I really liked it. It was cool. It was one of those things where I've always wanted to make music where I didn't know what it sounded like till it happened.
Yeah.
And I find that very exciting. And so I think that's what that, the installation was about. And it really did help me kind of let go, because I'm a pretty uptight composer, but yet I love John Cage, and he is not an uptight composer.
Right.
His whole thing is to take the hand out of the art form, so like the stink of your hand is not in your work. You're just sort of letting it be. It's super zen and
Right.
kind of hippie and
Yeah.
yeah, and so that was my way of, I was like, oh, I see what he does. I'm pretty sure he's really, like, the most uptight people in the world are the ones that are like, oh, I'm not uptight, you know. I meditate.
I'm completely calm, can't you
Yeah.
tell? Yeah. Now, were people able, when people went into this installation, were they able to push play? They were doing it themselves?
Yeah,
Oh, that's so cool. So you found this completely other way to interact with an audience,
yeah.
but you didn't even have to be there.
No,
That's so cool.
and I heard really cool stories, like, from the people that, taking care of the gallery. They were just like, yeah, I mean, people are hanging out here for like a half hour, which is a big deal. Like, most people just zoop, zoop, and they leave,
Right,
you know?
right.
And I was like, that's awesome. I heard, well, the first time I was there, someone walked in and just turned them all off and left, and I was like, that's really cool.
Yeah, that was a really interesting decision. What are you saying about sound?
Yeah, well, but
No sound.
yeah, that's cool though.
That's funny.
So yeah, and then I went to like an art high school, and I'm a big nerd. I'm a big art nerd, and I went there for like literature and criticism and theater and film. And so once I started doing sound installations, I went back to my love of like video and film and started making like really weird, non-narrative, slow down images of things, like, kids headbanging, just what that looks like, or just odd stuff. And I started working on like, oh God, it's going to sound so pretentious. But like a wordless opera, which, by the way, was a terrible idea because you kind of need some words. But I just wanted to hear like a choir, no context of like, story or anything, but just you could feel it, and it was with drums, and I like used some taiko drummers in town, and they showed that at another Pica event, and it was really cool. And I was just being like, it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, I can just like come up with these ideas, and then I have resources to do it. That's cool,
Yeah.
So I got really into that. But the thing about doing that kind of stuff is that like it's another world where nobody cares, because you're working in this very niche. I don't know. I mean, I care. I mean. And the people who are putting it on care, and I'm not trying at all, like, I'm not trying to be, like, super humble. Like, I'm just saying, like, there's not, the art world is just really big. And, like, the people who did enjoy it, I mean, and Portland's a small town. So it's just, like, I know I'm kind of just, like, sending balloons out to, like, sending, like, these, like, helium balloons out to nowhere. But I do it because I have to. So just to go back to your question of, like, why do you still do this? Or, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't just like, it wasn't that like, why are you still
Why are you doing this? Why don't you go get a job? Jesus.
It's because I have to.
Right.
And if I don't, I get really depressed. Because I worked at an advertising agency for 3 years, and I like, oh my God. And it wasn't like the people there were really nice. I was still doing a ton of projects. Most of these projects I actually was doing while I was at the advertising agency. But because I was just like, I'm just going to get a job in the creative industry. Get paid to be creative, right? That sounds awesome.
Right.
And I just realized, I was like, oh yeah, just because you can doesn't mean that it's going to like feel good. It's not like you should do it, but it's like, doesn't mean that it's not coming from the same place.
Claudia Meza, thank you so much for joining us on The Future of What?
Thanks for having me.
Can I have a taste of your ice cream? Can I lick the crumbs from your table? Can I interfere in your crisis? No, mind your own business. No, mind your own business.
Today on The Future of What, you heard Joyless Street by Bitch Magnet, Year of the Glad by Marnie Stern, and Eyes, Hands, Mouth by Explode Into Colors. Our theme music is Mind Your Own Business by the Delta 5. If you missed any of this show and you want to hear it again, we're at killrockstars.com/thefutureofwhat. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search Future of What. Reed Harvey is our engineer. Will Watts and John Sepulvedo produce the show. Special thanks to Amy Polanski and all the folks at Digital One Studios in Portland. I'm Portia Sabin. Thanks for listening.